in the heart of Vatican City, where the weight of centuries presses down like the ancient stones of St. Peter's Square. Tradition is an unbreakable law. The Swiss Guard, resplendent in their blue and gold uniforms, are more than soldiers. They are living symbols of discipline. Their stillness a testament to the Vatican's unyielding order. If even one of them were to falter, to so much as twitch, it would be a disgrace that echoed through the hallowed halls of the Holy See. But during the funeral of Pope Francis, one guard did more than falter. He stepped forward, defying centuries of protocol. His name was Lucas Bowman, and his actions would send shockwaves through the hearts of all who bore witness. Lucas Bowman was no ordinary man. At Trintichet, he was the epitome of a Swiss Guard, a man whose life had been shaped by 14 years of impeccable service. He was born in a small village nestled in the Swiss Alps, where the mountains stood as silent sentinels, and the air carried the weight of tradition. Lucas's father, Marcus Bowman, had been a Swiss Guard in his youth, serving under Pope John Paul II. Marcus had raised Lucas on stories of the Vatican tales of honor, duty, and the sacred bond between the Guard and the Holy See. As a boy, Lucas would sit by the fire, his eyes wide, as his father described the grandeur of St. Peter's Basilica, the solemnity of papal ceremonies, and the pride of wearing the uniform. It's not just a job, Marcus would say, his voice thick with emotion. It's a calling. You serve something greater than yourself. Those words had shaped Lucas's life. At 23, he left the Alps to join the Swiss Guard. His father's old halberd passed down to him as a symbol of their shared legacy. Lucas excelled from the start, his discipline unmatched, his loyalty unquestioned. He memorized every protocol, mastered every drill, and stood for hours in the Roman sun without so much as blinking. To his comrades, he was a rock, unyielding, dependable, the perfect soldier. But beneath his stoic exterior, Lucas carried a quiet burden. He was a man of deep faith, raised on the teachings of the Church. Yet he often wrestled with the rigidity of his role, was standing still, obeying without question, truly the highest form of devotion. Or was there a deeper loyalty, one that required courage, not just compliance? It was a cold April morning in 2025, when the world gathered to mourn Pope Francis. St. Peter's Square was a sea of over 50 Mozilla souls, their faces etched with grief, their silence so profound it seemed to still the very air. The sky was overcast, a gray veil that mirrored the somber mood. Cardinals in scarlet robes moved with measured steps, their prayers mingling with the soft tolling of bells from the basilica. The Swiss Guard stood in perfect formation, their halberds gleaming despite the dim light, their faces impassive. Lucas was among them, positioned near the center of the square, his eyes fixed on the horizon, his body rigid as stone. Yet inside, a storm was brewing, a storm that had been set in motion days before, in a moment that would change everything. It had happened in the Pope's private chambers, a place few guards ever entered. Pope Francis, frail but radiant with a quiet strength, had summoned Lucas late one evening. The room was dimly lit, the air heavy with the scent of incense. The Pope sat in a simple wooden chair, his hands folded in his lap, his eyes searching Lucas's face. "You have a good heart, Lucas," he had said, his voice soft but firm. "I see it in you, the struggle between duty and faith. It is a heavy burden, but it is also a gift." Lucas had stood at attention, unsure how to respond. The Pope reached into his robes and withdrew a sealed envelope, its edges worn as if he had held it for a long time. "Keep this close," he said, pressing it into Lucas's palm. "When the moment comes, you will know what to do. Remember, Lucas, there are times when love demands we step out of line." Lucas had nodded, his throat tight with emotion, though he did not fully grasp the weight of the words. He tucked the letter inside his uniform, its presence a constant reminder of the Pope's trust. Over the next few days, as the Pope's health declined, Lucas carried the letter with him everywhere, its words echoing in his mind. He reread it in the barracks late at night, the candlelight casting shadows on the parchment. Love demands we step out of line. What did it mean? Was the Pope asking him to defy the very traditions he had sworn to uphold? The thought was unthinkable, yet it gnawed at him, a quiet whisper beneath the rigid rhythm of his duties. Now, standing in St. Peter's Square, Lucas felt the letter's weight as if it were a stone against his heart. The funeral procession began. The Pope's casket, carried on the shoulders of priests, its polished wood catching the faint light. The crowd's silence deepened, a collective holding of breaths. Lucas's mind raced. The Pope's words echoed in his ears, louder now, more urgent. His training screamed at him to remain still, to uphold the sacred tradition of the Guard. But his heart, stirred by the Pope's cryptic command, urged him to act. The conflict tore at him, each second stretching into eternity. He thought of his father, of the pride in Marcus's eyes, when Lucas had first donned the uniform. What would his father think if he broke rank? Would he understand? Or would he see it as a betrayal of everything they held dear? Then, as the casket passed before him, something shifted. It was as if the Pope's voice spoke directly to his soul, a gentle but insistent call. Lucas's breath caught. His body, trained to obey, rebelled against itself. His right foot moved, the sole of his boot striking the marble with a sound that cut through the silence like a gunshot. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Heads turned, eyes wide with disbelief. A Swiss guard had moved, had broken rank. Lucas took another step, then another, his heart pounding so fiercely he thought it might burst. The world seemed to slow, every detail vivid. The shocked faces of his fellow guards, the murmurs of the crowd, the cold marble beneath his feet. He could feel the eyes of the cardinals on him, their disapproval a palpable weight. He reached the casket, his hands trembling as he withdrew the letter from his uniform. The envelope was simple, unadorned, yet it carried the weight of a divine command. Lucas placed it gently atop the coffin, his fingers lingering for a moment, as if to ensure it would not fall. The crowd watched in stunned silence, the air thick with tension. Then he stepped back, his eyes fixed on the letter, now a silent testament to his act of defiance. The entire sequence lasted 28 seconds. But in those fleeting moments, the Vatican, a bastion of tradition, was shaken to its core. Lucas returned to his place, his chest heaving, his mind a whirlwind of fear and resolve. The crowd's silence gave way to whispers, then murmurs, as the procession continued. His fellow guards stared straight ahead, their faces unreadable, but Lucas could feel their judgment. Among them was Matteo Ricci, a young guard who had joined the same year as Lucas. Matteo had always been competitive, his ambition a sharp contrast to Lucas's quiet dedication. Now, Matteo's eyes burned with resentment. "You've shamed us all," he hissed under his breath, his voice barely audible. Lucas said nothing, his gaze fixed on the casket as it disappeared into the basilica. He had done the unthinkable. He had placed a letter, a personal act, above the sacred discipline of the Guard. What would happen now? Would he be stripped of his rank, cast out in disgrace? The uncertainty gnawed at him, but beneath it was a quiet certainty. He had honored the Pope's wish. The repercussions came swiftly. That evening, Lucas was summoned to the Vatican Council, a panel of stern-faced cardinals and commanders who held his fate in their hands. The chamber was austere, its walls lined with portraits of past popes, their eyes seeming to judge him. Cardinal Rossi, a towering figure with a reputation for inflexibility, presided over the meeting. "Explain yourself," he demanded, his voice sharp as a blade. "You have dishonored the Swiss Guard, the Vatican, and the memory of His Holiness." Lucas stood tall, though his heart raced. He recounted the Pope's words, his voice steady as he quoted the letter. "True discipline is knowing when to move for a greater purpose. He spoke of the Pope's trust, of the letter's cryptic command, of his struggle to reconcile duty with faith. The council was divided. Cardinal Rossi was unrelenting, his face a mask of disapproval. "You acted alone," he said, "without authority. You placed your judgment above tradition." But another voice spoke up. Cardinal Elena Moretti, a younger member of the council known for her progressive views. "Perhaps," she said, her tone measured, "His Holiness saw something in Lucas that we do not. Perhaps this act, though unorthodox, was a fulfillment of the Pope's will." The debate was heated, voices rising, as Lucas stood silently, his fate hanging in the balance. Some saw his act as a betrayal, others a bold expression of faith. In the end, the council reached a compromise. Lucas would not be expelled, a fate that would have branded him a pariah. But he was stripped of his public duties. No longer would he stand in St. Peter's Square, a visible symbol of the Guard. Instead, he was reassigned to the Vatican archives, a shadowy realm deep beneath the city, where secrets were kept and forgotten. The archives were a world apart from the grandeur of the square. Dust-covered tomes lined endless shelves, their pages whispering of centuries past. The air was cool and still, the silence broken only by the soft rustle of parchment. Lucas, now clad in a plain black uniform, felt like a ghost, his once vibrant role reduced to cataloging relics and manuscripts. His first day in the archives was a stark contrast to the life he had known. The head archivist, Father Lorenzo, a wiry man with a sharp mind and a dry sense of humor, greeted him with a raised eyebrow. "So, you're the one who caused all the fuss," he said, his tone more curious than judgmental. "Well, down here, we don't care much for ceremony, but we do care about the truth. Let's see if you can handle that." As days turned to weeks, Lucas began to see his exile differently. The archives were not a punishment, but a revelation. Here, among the Vatican's hidden treasures, Lucas discovered stories of others who had dared to act saints, scholars, even popes who had broken with tradition to preserve something greater. One manuscript, in particular, struck him, the writings of a 16th century guard named Giovanni Valli, who had defied orders to save a sacred relic from invaders during the sack of Rome in 1527. Giovanni had been condemned in his time, his name erased from official records. Yet his act had preserved a piece of the Vatican's soul, a fragment of the true cross, said to have been touched by Christ himself. Lucas read the words again and again, feeling a kinship with the forgotten hero. His own act, though small in comparison, was part of the same lineage, a quiet stand for what was right, even when no one understood. But not everyone in the archives was as welcoming as Father Lorenzo. Among the staff was Clara, a young researcher who viewed Lucas with suspicion. "You think you're some kind of hero, don't you?" she said one day, her voice laced with disdain. "You broke the rules, and now you're hiding down here while the rest of us clean up the mess." Clara had grown up in a strict Catholic family, her faith rooted in the Church's traditions. To her, Lucas's actions were a betrayal of everything she held dear. Over time, however, as they worked side by side, Clara began to see the depth of Lucas's conviction. One evening, as they catalogued a collection of papal letters, she asked, "Why did you do it? Why risk everything?" Lucas paused, his eyes distant. "Because sometimes," he said, "the greatest way to honor the Church is to listen to its heart, not just its rules." Clara didn't respond, but a flicker of understanding passed through her eyes. Months passed, and Lucas settled into his new role. He worked alone most days, his hands steady as he handled ancient manuscripts, his mind often drifting to the funeral. He thought of the boy in the crowd, a young Italian child whose father had lifted him onto his shoulders to see the procession. The boy's eyes had locked onto Lucas as he stepped forward, a look of awe on his face. That image stayed with Lucas, a reminder that his act had touched lives beyond the Vatican's walls. One afternoon, as he sorted through a stack of ancient letters, that same boy approached him. The child, no older than 10, was part of a tour group, his eyes wide with curiosity. "You're the one, aren't you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "The one who stepped out at the funeral." Lucas froze, surprised by the recognition. He nodded slowly, unsure of what to say. The boy grinned. "My dad said it was the bravest thing he'd ever seen. He said it made him believe in God again." Lucas felt a warmth he hadn't known in months. "It wasn't about bravery," he said, his voice soft. "Sometimes the greatest way to honor the rules is to know when to break them for something sacred." The boy nodded, as if he understood, and ran back to his group, his laughter echoing through the stone corridors. Lucas watched him go, a smile tugging at his lips. For the first time since the funeral, he felt at peace. He thought of his father, wondering what Marcus would say if he were alive. Perhaps he would have been proud not of the act itself, but of the faith that had driven it. Now, Lucas serves in the shadows, his name known to few. His black uniform blends into the dim corridors of the archives, a far cry from the vibrant colors he once wore. He is no longer a symbol of the Vatican's outward glory, but he has become something more, a guardian of its deeper truths. He knows that tradition is not just about standing still, about rigid adherence to rules. It is about preserving the heart of what matters, even when the world does not see. He thinks often of Pope Francis, of the quiet wisdom in his eyes, and of the letter that changed everything. The envelope now rests in a locked drawer in the archives, a private relic of a moment that reshaped Lucas's life. Lucas's story is a reminder that loyalty is not always a straight line. Sometimes it is a single step, a fleeting act that defies expectation. Sometimes the greatest devotion is to move for love, for humanity, for faith. His journey challenges us to look beyond the surface of tradition, to seek the deeper truths that lie beneath. It asks us to consider the cost of standing still and the courage it takes to step forward. As we reflect on his journey, ask yourself, what would you do in Lucas's place? Would you stand firm, rooted in tradition, or would you dare to step forward, trusting your heart to guide you? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's keep this conversation alive, honoring the courage it takes to choose the harder path.